Welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. And this is the Great Work Launchpad, Ep.19, continuation of a series on shadow work Pt.17. And we're talking about fear or love, the dynamic of fear or love, which polarity, which force, which motivator you're choosing to live by. And this is Fear or Love Part 2. The Great Work Launchpad is an effort to get people launched into the great work. So the hope is to inspire people or get them to do the work that we're going through in all these episodes, to deal with their own baggage so that they can get initiated into doing the great work. And this platform is here to assist in that process of launching oneself up. Because here is a platform where you can come online and you can talk about a subject, or you can join in the conversation that we're already having. If you want to present something, you just have to contact me, let me know. If you want help in getting started, contact me and I can be like, okay, well, here's a homework assignment, and that'll help you get started in doing something. It could be writing or talking about something for 1 minute, something, and if you're not ready for that, well, then you still have fears holding you back. And that's what these episodes are about, is understanding the dynamics of fear and love, and understanding how when you act a certain way, that is representative of these underlying dynamics, these underlying forces, these underlying motivators within you that are driving certain behaviors. And by driving some behaviors, it's inhibiting other behaviors. So if you're being driven by an adequate force of love or true care, as was talked about last week, then you're going to be caring for moral truth and justice and right and good and true freedom, caring about the rights of all being respected. And when you care enough to that point, then you're going to be activated in trying to do moral education or related peripheral education by creating content. And the only way, or the majority of the way, that people become awakened to anything in our modern life, and that's through content on the internet. It's not speaking to people individually. That's not how I woke up. I doubt how that's anyone else who wakes up. Could be through books. But in our current day and age, it's through media online. Media that is video, media that is audio. Those are the two biggest forms of media, and there are ebooks, there are books. But the two biggest ones are obviously video, even more so now, and audio in secondary, and then I'd say ebooks in a tertiary aspect. And certainly that includes physical books, but definitely speaking to people on a one-on-one basis is not how most people are going to be influenced to awaken. Not that that is a unworthy action to take in your life, but it should not be the focal of your time, attention, energy, and what you repeatedly apply your will towards is not in that one-on-one encounter to try to influence people towards the goal of moral self-actualization. Hey, Brendan. Welcome. Glad to see you're here.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speak again.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just gonna. I Because normally I have you lowered in decibels relative to where I'm showing up. Pretty much like with Derek, I do that too. But I pumped you up to the max of what I put you back at 0 rather than at minus decibels. So that's the
Yeah,
max I
because
got you at.
I'm none of my main.
You're doing good. I'm gonna
Yeah.
lower you a bit because I had my volume low. I forgot to raise it up. So you're good.
All right.
Yeah, you're
Appreciate
good.
it.
It's all good. Okay. So yeah, so that's the purpose of the great work and the purpose of these episodes. I'm talking about fear and love, and we talked about it in an introductory, I guess, capacity last week. Um, so yeah, I'll just give a quick recap. Went over fear and love, fear, lower consciousness, contracting consciousness. Staying silent about the enslavement, the evil, and how to end it. Well, that's when you're in cowardice, inaction, and laziness, or apathy and not caring, and that's serving either stagnation by not doing anything to change it, so it just persists, or it's serving in a dark capacity by promoting that agenda and pushing it forward in an involutionary capacity, going backwards rather than just stagnating. And then contrast it to love, agape, true care, care for moral truth, justice, right, good, true freedom, caring about the rights of others, higher consciousness, expanding consciousness, speaking about our enslavement and the evil, and especially how to end it, most importantly. And that favors serving of growth, our personal growth, growth as a species, evolution of the individual, and the evolution of our species. We're not talking about love as a feeling. We're talking about romance or family, friends, love, and serving truth. The problems with eros and jealousy and possessiveness. We talked about that. Tough love of being harsh, to do battle with the falsity. Sometimes it takes that, and people need to detach from their falsity, and sometimes you need to detach from people if they won't detach from falsity and they stay attached to it and stuck to it. It can still have fear, but you gotta overcome it, and you can have that experience. But the goal is to not let it drive you, to not let it limit you, because these are limiting factors. You gotta transcend them, to power through them, transmute them, and in spite of those things being present, to do things in spite of them. So in spite of the fear, you act. In spite of the evil, you act. So there's the feeling you can have, and then there's the serving of that force in either a capacity of stagnation or reversal as involution of our moral advancement. And yeah, it's almost caught up to where we were. There's a lot of comfort in doing nothing, that stagnation. You might not be in fear in several other capacities, but you're still in a form of fear in terms of laziness, that stagnation. If you're valuing comfort of doing nothing, not getting involved, not sacrificing, that's still serving the involutionary force. And involution has you, fear has you, cowardice has you. You're not helping if you think you are. So stop lying to yourself about that if you convince yourself that you are. And yeah, you got to look at the bigger picture, the wider scope of the moral condition of all, not just yourself and your family, and if you're being treated well. And even that, there's ignorance of your collective state within society and how you're having your rights violated anyways. So that's a wrap up. You wanted to add anything, or
Just just real quick. My headset battery hell is low, so it may die within an hour. But I mean, you said, of course, to wrap up so wonderfully. But yeah, fear and comfort. There's no growth. There's no learning. When you're in that state of being, comfort. In that state of fear. So, we have to get out of that mindset. And unfortunately, with all the tyranny, going on, within the world, people still haven't gotten out and transmuted that fear into true love, as far as, care for truth, care for, right action, and doing the right moral thing in spite of all of the evil that's going on, all around us, in spite of everyone else, still choosing to do wrong over what's morally good. So, how we keep repeating this thing is we have to get into that higher state of love, to where it's not just the how romantic, it's to actually wanting to do good just because it's the right thing, how to do. You're not looking for any rewards, you're not looking for any favoritism, you're not looking for any, thanks or anything like that. You're just doing it because you truly care and you want to be free, and you truly care about the evolution, not just of your own consciousness, but the evolution of our species, to where, we can get to that, state to where we should be at. Like that's the mindset we all should have, like truly wanting to grow and learn and actually he'll evolve and transmute this form of devolution that we seem to be stuck in. That's what true love is. And that's only going to start with caring for truth and doing what's morally right, and, changing the way you think. And courage is required in all of that, especially now. How we need courage more than ever.
Yeah, well said, for sure. The Yes, people don't care enough. That's that was the whole point of my presentation at Funnel 4. You gotta truly care about being enslaved. And until you do, well, that's why you're not activated, because you do not care enough. You're still letting that fear drive you instead of having that force of love be what is driving you, because you actually care enough even about yourself. So you can make it all about in a selfish capacity. You don't even care about your own enslavement. Forget about caring about the wider aspect of enslavement, how it's enslaving anybody. You don't even care about your own enslavement to do anything about it. And, you know, even for me, like tonight, I didn't feel like doing this, man. I'm pretty drained today. Every day I'm getting up, I make breakfast, and then I work all day. And then I gotta make supper for the family, and then I gotta give baths, and then I'm reading books, and it's like, I don't know. Today I'm just like, don't feel like it, but I'm still doing it. And this is like low tier compared to doing presentations. That's like higher tier aspects of the great work. Um, I guess we lost Brandon there. It's still doing something, even though it's not as demanding. In terms of like thinking about things, trying to explain them, thinking about them for prolonged periods, try to find more details, trying to go deeper, making presentations and slides and images. Like that's the higher tier work. And I'm trying to like eventually do the next parts of the law of freedom. It'll be on chaos and order and this whole dynamic of entropy and centropy. Um, but yeah, I still have to get back to doing that. But yeah, life is pretty busy. So despite all that, I'm not doing the higher level presentations, but I'm still doing this, which is lower level, but it's still getting into enough detail to explain things and to like help people form a picture. And yes, it's based a lot on Passio's work and trying to maybe bring other angles into it. But if more people did this, Passio already did a lot of the work. And if there were 100,000 people just being a broken record and repeating the quality truths, you're not going to, I mentioned this before, it's rare that you're going to find something truly unique and truly new that no one has ever said. So likely you're going to be saying something that someone else has said. So you're going to be a broken record. And that's fine. That's actually good. Being a broken record is what is needed in terms of being a broken record on quality truths relative to what other people have already spoken. Everyone's going to be talking about the same thing. And if your outlook is that, well, I should only be talking about things that are new or that you think people haven't heard, then you're not going to be repeating the quality truths. The quality truths are the most important. That is, moral truth is the highest quality truth to be talking about. So just because I've done, I don't know, like 15 hours worth or 20 hours worth of presentations on it doesn't mean you can't talk about moral truth and be a broken record and repeat what I've talked about, which is repeating what Passio's talked about or other people. And I try to bring in unique things that I've never heard other people talk about. And maybe someone has talked about it and I don't know. But that's not the point. The point is the point is the moral education. And as I was saying, if there was 100,000 people doing something like this and putting out information about these quality truths, then imagine that on YouTube. If there was 100,000 people, maybe not every week, maybe every month, and that'd be more content being shown relative to these important philosophical subjects for people to learn from, and how much more of an impact that would have on potentially reaching more people. You make content, it's not a guarantee that you're going to reach more people. It's a potential. We're always dealing with potentials of people coming across it and then being influenced by it and then applying the knowledge through an understanding and using it in their lives as power to change, to do things differently. So I just wanted to add that little part. And yeah, one thing that we didn't talk about was obviously Passio's expressions of the forces of love and fear. And I'm going to be remaking this eventually when I do the Natural Law, the Science of Morality Part 6, which will deal with consciousness. And I'll do a bunch of videos like I did with the Law of Freedom, and I'll be going into this in more depth, but differently, with more precision of terms and making it more specific and more detailed to bring more clarity of understanding. But this is a good starter and it's pretty encompassing. I wouldn't say, one of the things is the sovereignty and confusion, because you can relate them to aspects of the trivium, but then there's stuff you can put in between. And anyways, the natural law expressions. This chart is amazing, and you should know it if you haven't learned it already. And you start with that generative polarity of love or fear. So fear contracts consciousness, brings you into states of unconsciousness, relative to love, which is expanding consciousness. If it's expanding consciousness and represents consciousness, then the opposite is doing the opposite of expanding, it's contraction. And instead of consciousness, more consciousness, it's reducing that consciousness, so that's unconsciousness. And then from those generative polarities, what we use to create, what emanates, what we hold inside of us that allows us to bring forth and emanate externally through our actions or through our thoughts and understanding that eventually lead to the actions, is the initial expression of how it starts. So you gain knowledge. So this should be, it says acceptance of truth, but knowledge can be false knowledge. You can have knowledge of things, as the trivium method demonstrates. Knowledge is just input. So the knowledge you can have is knowledge of what can be true and what can be false. And yes, the goal is acceptance of the truth. So it would be more, I would say, truth, love, and then truth. And then you gain truth. And when you're in fear, well, you're not seeking out truth. You don't know how to discern truth. And if you come across it, then you're probably going to refuse the truth. So you're going to remain ignorant. And the internal expression of what happens inside of you, well, if you go from knowledge, then you'd have understanding. So you gain an understanding. for following the trivia method. And with that understanding, well, we're not talking about just any truths, we're talking about quality truth, and that's moral truth. So, with that understanding of moral truth, you gain an understanding of sovereignty and you develop an internal monarchy to self-direct yourself, to have self-mastery, self-governance, enlightenment of your own state of being and the respect of other people's existence and their rights. So your own rights and their rights. So you recognize your sovereignty and their sovereignty, at least natural sovereignty, and other people might not recognize it within themselves, but it's always there. Our rights are always there. And the corollary, in contrast, in the negative polarity of fear, is instead of having that understanding, you have confusion. And so this is where my chart's going to be slightly different and more specific. So we have understanding and confusion, and that understanding of moral truth leads to sovereignty. And when you have confusion of the moral truth, well, to correlate with sovereignty, you'd have domination, where you think that it's okay for others to dominate, or you think it's okay for you to dominate. And usually that's the thinking is that it's okay for others to dominate. It's okay for others to rule. It's okay for others to be masters. It's not anarchy and sovereignty and no slaves. It's, well, people don't view it that way, but that's the fundamental architecture of their state of mind. That is how they view it because they're accepting masters and rulers, and hence there's others who are slaves. So that confusion leads to that acceptance of domination in our world, of archons or rulers or masters. And that creates internal anarchy because they're not accepting that they are a sovereign and they're a monarch, a ruler of themselves. They're accepting to be ruled by others. And then your external expression, which also goes with the last one, the manifestation, because freedom is an external state and so is order. When you have true freedom, you have true order. When you don't have true freedom, you don't have true order. And freedom, the corollary is slavery, which is a form of control. And so when you have freedom, that's and true order, then that's manifesting good, and that's manifesting external anarchy. And that's the external expression, the external manifestation. And yeah, when you're accepting that others exert control over those who do not initiate harm, then you're accepting that they are making false claims of ownership upon the property rights of others, and thus enslaving them. And that is a chaotic dynamic as opposed to an orderly dynamic. And that's what fear ultimately represents, is chaos or entropy in a universal dynamic, looking at it at a wider scale. When we apply it to the individuals and the aggregation of individuals in our behavior, it results in enslavement and chaos. All right. Pass it to you, Brandon, if you have anything you want to add. I can't hear you. Oh. I heard a flick, but I didn't hear your voice. I can't hear you. You're not muted on my end. Oh, I saw like
Yeah,
oh, there we
my
go.
headset.
There you go.
Yeah,
It's good.
yeah, my headset's going crazy. I'm trying to charge it now, so it's going a little bonkers. But um, I've always looked at the right side as what false religion does. Um, because you have true religion, if you look at it from its etymology, just means to bind. And when you look at the red side and what it's, you have applied to, reality, when you take in fear, and then you have the ignorance and confusion and control, and then of course you have the chaos. I've always looked at that, as the religious dogmatic, teachings. And it doesn't have to be, like Christianity. It's just any form of thought or any form of indoctrination that leads us hell away from the truth. And then therefore we get stuck there, then we bind ourselves there, then we aren't willing to learn, because when you don't take in, that truth, then you have that fear. That's always going to be, that baseline. And I remember when I first saw this slide, I didn't understand how important, it was. And I didn't even notice that the trivium is embedded, in the slide. But as I, study it more and, dive deeply more into Patriot's work and of course, into your own work and, just doing a lot of, contemplation, then I started to see how this is, pretty much how we consciously create. You have the green form or like the green side being the conscious or the true will, then you have the polarity, the opposite being the unconscious creation, the lowercase will. And sadly, if you are honest with yourself, you would see where not only you lie, like if you are using this chart, if you are on the red, the green side, because if you're not actively engaged on the battlefield and doing this work, then you are still on this red side. And then two, where majority of humanity's consciousness hell is at. And you can see where it's at by looking at the effects that we are reaping and the consequences that are happening in society. It's not on the positive, love, knowledge, sovereignty, freedom, because we don't have order. It's 99.9999% on the fear, ignorance, confusion, control, and chaos. And by coming to this understanding, then you can be more honest with yourself and figure out, why is it that you, as a listener, aren't getting involved? Because a lot of people will still tell themselves, whatever kind of bullshit, will continue to lie, to themselves. That's you still being in that fear and that ignorance and confusion and that safety blanket, that comfort zone. So this slide can really help you come to a better understanding. And then of course you have that last manifestation, order and chaos. And Kris, you also, how you have that, you have your two slides of the triangle and the upside down merged together. This pretty much is what that slide is almost encompassing to. It's just, yours goes into, more detail as far as, incorporating the trivium, with each step. And you can also, help create your own slide if you were, have very, knowledgeable on what, is being presented here. Because it doesn't have to be, like this one way, how Kris has created one, and like you said, he's gone, he's going to go even deeper. And I've also created my own slide that I had presented in one of the One Great Work Warriors, videos. And that's just to get a better understanding, to kind of break down, like to break down these things, not just from the way, we all learn it from Mark, but to get a better, deeper understanding. That way I can verify these things and, actually know it, and not just take, his word or, your word. Is if I can create it, my own self, then I can test it and see like, hey, is what, how this is actually valid. Like it's actually true. Because when you do that, you will see that it is. Because this is the the way we create. That's why it's called the natural law expressions. That's how we express ourselves because you can only create with love or fear. And of course, that love is symbolic and representative of care, truth, right, freedom, all of the higher states of consciousness we should be aspiring to. And of course, that is what should lead toward the end game goal, which is freedom. But sadly, we are still manifesting evil and we are still, manifesting, chaos. And then also too, this slide is also, have reminiscent of the majority is going to lead humanity. So if majority is leading humanity toward the good, then we are going to experience the good. If majority is leading humanity toward, have the shitter, then we are going to experience that shit.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to add to that. Well said. Uh, yeah, this is another one I made back in 2014. This was the original. And then I remade it to be more readable with the background. But this one is just relating like a moral application, which is like what Passio had on the previous slide. And then I related it to the trivium and to levels of consciousness, or the levels of consciousness is what Passio had. Yeah. Anyways, I was trying to relate a bunch of frameworks together to bring them all together. And so I call this my natural law chart, something like that. Natural law morality trivium chart. If you want to look at it on my site, you can find it there. I won't go into it because there's a lot here. It'll take up probably the rest of the episode. But we could just read the bold parts. Your level of expression. Well, do you care for truth? Where am I here? You care for truth. Care for morality. That's what we mean. When we're talking about care for truth, it's not, do you care for knowing who won the basketball game 2 years ago or something? Like, who gives a shit? Talking about quality truths, and the highest quality one is morality. So you care for morality, ultimately. That's what we're talking about, caring for truth. So you seek and discover knowledge. That's the moral application. And that's the grammar knowledge input part, the metaphysics equivalent. And the level of consciousness is, caring for truth. You seek to evolve consciousness. And the failure is ignorance. You have false perceptions of things. You're unconscious living as the quote, the dead. Or you're dead in your care. You could have apathy. Dead in your knowledge, ignorance. Dead in your understanding is confusion. And dead in your action or wisdom. So you could have inaction, cowardice, instead of applying your will. And after that, after you care for morality, well, then you gotta, this is in my trivium stuff and my care for truth heart infographic. You gotta care about it first, then you gotta seek it. Right here, seek. And then you gotta embody the moral truth to evolve your consciousness. Well, you gotta embrace it after you seek it, accept it, and then you embody it, and then you live it in your life. And then you're generating with truth to live in higher, realer, truer consciousness and existence. Yeah, I'll just stop that there, and I'll go back to my notes that I've been neglecting so far this episode. So I forget if I mentioned this part at the end of the last episode, but I think we ended with look at the bigger picture, the wider scope of the moral condition of all, not just the scope of you and yours, your little area of your selfish life, trying to maximize your survival, maximize your time, maximize your comfort, enjoyment, pleasure, fun for yourself and those around you. And you're going to try to sacrifice that time and that enjoyment and that comfort that you're going to direct normally elsewhere. And you're going to put it into efforts to do content creation with the goal of ending enslavement, ending the collective condition of enslavement that we have. And you can look at it as there's a reward and a failure. So when you're looking at short-term and long-term goals, we have short-term or long-term rewards or short-term or long-term failures. And most people are being led around by short-term rewards. They think, what can I get that'll make me happy, that'll make me comfortable, that'll bring me enjoyment, joy, pleasure, fun, entertainment, whatever. Today, tomorrow, next weekend. What am I, it's all short-term thinking. They might have long-term plans, but again, it's all selfishly revolving around them. And but they're always looking at what's the reward I'm going to have in 5 years? What's my 5 year plan? What am I going to get out of it? What am I going to do, um, today? What am I going to do here that's going to be beneficial to me? How is it going to affect me? And so they're being led around by their short-term reward from pleasure, or even the scarcity of survival mindset, the scarcity and of security mindset. So even if they're not going to feel like it's a reward, well, they're going to do their job. They're like focused on doing a job so that they make money so that they can survive. There might be other dynamics related to that, but the scarcity and survival and security is what people are led around every day in a short-term focus. So instead of looking at that, like if I don't do this, well, then I'm not going to have that. Or if I do this, then I get that. Only related to your own personal life. You got to be motivated by long-term and higher rewards. So when you create content, it takes a lot of time. Well, this, like I said at the beginning, is more on the lower tier. But when you're creating a presentation, that takes a lot of time. You got to go higher into the conceptualizing and really thinking things, like unless you're just taking information from elsewhere, then you're just summarizing it. But if you're trying to go deeper, then it takes a lot of mulling it over and thinking it, and then you gotta do notes, and then you gotta do infographics like I do, and then as I showed, it was in the first episode or the second one, I got all my papers, and I got like years and years of papers of stuff, of like writing things down and charts and stuff, and then you got to translate that to the computer, and you got to refine it and make it look pretty, and then even from your first version, you got your revision. When you bring it to the computer, you're going to revise that model that you made or the information. You're going to make edits to it. So that's all a time-consuming process, and that's short term. There is no reward. Short term, it's not on the positive side. You're being motivated to do it because you're looking at that long-term potential, not a potential that is guaranteed to be actualized. It's a potential. Then the potential higher reward is of not being enslaved. That's why you got to care about not wanting to be enslaved, so that you can have that as a goal. Well, the goal I hope to eventually have is, well, I don't want to be enslaved. Well, then what do I got to do to not be enslaved? And this is the work, the shadow work, and getting involved in the labor. And when you were talking about ignorance that people are in, and that's where I was just thinking, mentioning comfort, the whole ignorance is bliss, because knowledge is a burden. And when you have the knowledge, you will be burdened by it, because with that knowledge comes responsibility. That, kind of like that Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, that power is when you do something with the knowledge. And that's what the burden of the knowledge is to do something with it, not just to like have absorbed it. It came in as input knowledge, and then you understood it. So you understand how it relates to other things. You have a context around it. You have meaning and purpose for the knowledge, but then you're not doing anything with it. Well, there's no power being applied, because you're not taking that responsibility of that knowledge, of those quality truths, not taking that responsibility for what to do with that knowledge and apply it as power or potential power. And that's what this is this is potential. The work that is done on, say, a presentation There's lots of hours spent into it, and it's a potential for a higher reward because you're not guaranteed that even if you spend 100 hours like I have, or however much time I've spent on like that morality presentation and others, um, you're not guaranteed that anything's going to come about from it. You're the only guarantee is that you might have some people watch it, and you might have some people understand it and take it in and maybe do something with it. But it's not a guarantee, and certainly it's not a guarantee that you're going to be ending evil, which is the whole purpose of doing some of this work, is to ending the evil, ending the immorality, ending our enslavement. That's certainly not a guarantee. It's a potential, and the potential is a very small percentage to realize, and the potential increases in likelihood and probability as opposed to just being a possibility. It increases in probability and likelihood the more people create the content to spread that knowledge to potentially reach other people. And that's another part of the potential, is the potential it reaches other people, because the knowledge therein has to reach the majority. So if you don't have a lot of reach, well, then the potential to reach the majority is very low. So the potential for your work to actually end enslavement is extremely low. And that's just the reality of it. And even if it was on all TVs everywhere on the planet and it reached 1 billion people, even then, it wouldn't change things instantly, because there was always, that's just the input people would receive, and then they would have to understand it. So given that they would understand it, then they would have to act upon it in order to change their behavior, to change the way we live as a species on this planet, to not support our own enslavement through authority, the systems of authority that we have. So even if the knowledge reached everybody, and even if they understood it, it's still only a potential. The potential increases, but the potential isn't actualized yet until people actualize it by their actions. It's only a potential for actualization, and each individual has to take that alchemical work and that journey to self-actualize, to individuate themselves in alignment with that moral knowledge. So this is this motivation that you gotta have, and yeah, it's looking bleak, right? I'm talking about potential upon potential upon potential, and the further closer you get to where you are, the potential is very low as just one individual doing something. But you have to look at that, the goal that you're striving for, that higher goal of you do not want to be enslaved, and you care about not being enslaved. So even though your work is going to do like very little in terms of influencing the world to change, that's not what you need to look at as that failure to motivate you. You need to look at the higher reward potential of not being enslaved and your part in helping to make that happen. Because if you do not take that burden upon yourself, that burden of that knowledge, then how are you going to expect someone else to do it if you're not willing to do it? And then if you don't do it, and they don't do it, and no one does it, nothing will change. And the change, you're going to be part of that stagnation in that force of fear and entropy and chaos. And those who actively input into that dark spiral, like I have my infographic of people driving things down and people trying to drive it up. If no one's trying to drive things back up, then there's only the people stagnating to let things go down, and people actively pushing things down into that involutionary force. And that's where we're going to go. So it is, the burden is upon you, everyone who hears this, everyone who's aware of this. The burden is on your shoulder. It's on my shoulder. It's on Brandon's shoulder. We have to do things to actualize that goal, because if we do not take on that burden to morally educate, well, people aren't going to get morally educated. It's not just going to happen through some epiphany and just some miraculous awakening where they're just going to suddenly get it, because that's not been happening for thousands of years, and it's not going to happen for 1,000 more years or 1,000,000 years. That's not how things happen. We're not suddenly infused with knowledge from some Akashic records or whatever hell people want to believe the way the universe is structured, and it just doesn't come into you. It takes work, and then once you know it, that's where the burden. That's when the burden begins. You got to bear that weight, like Atlas, bear the weight of the world, because we're trying to free the world, and you got to bear that responsibility, bear the cross. And that's the whole symbolism of Jesus, whether that all those stories actually happened or not. You take it as a story to convey allegorical meaning. And when you're carrying that cross, that's what it is. You got to carry the cross. You got to bear the cross, and it's heavy. And people could be hating you and trying to attack you, but that's the burden of carrying moral truth. All right, you wanted to say anything about that?
Um, I'm glad you touched on the part about, of course, the more people who are doing this, then the higher probability, we have at reaching more minds and changing, you know, how the tide. It's not 100%, guaranteed, but the more hands, then the easier the work is going to be. And when you look at, Hapacio's natural law seminar, it's got like hundreds of thousands of views. But then you ask yourself, what, he put that out, like around 2012 maybe?
13.
Yeah, 2013. It's like, where are all these people? Where are all of those individuals, who have been, you know, watchers, listeners? Because you started doing work in 2014, because that's when, hell, I figured out, who Kris Nelson was. Because, like, man, who is this dude? And I know, like other people have seen your work, like just like many other people have seen a lot of other, her great teachers' work. But it's like, where are these individuals? Why aren't they, putting their foot in the door? And again, it goes back to that fear dynamic. It goes back to that right side of the natural law of expressions. And one thing people forget is, because we're so stuck in this rat race, this hamster wheel. How I think it was two videos ago. How you broke it down. We got 24 hours in a day. You usually sleep for 8 hours. You spend another 8 hours, like at work. So that gives you only 8 more hours. And of course, if you drive to work, if it takes you 8 hours going back and forth, you're down to 6 hours. Well, most people don't have the time, or they're not willing to find and sacrifice the time to not only to learn, but to take what they learn and put it into actual, right action. But when you look at, what ancient man, was doing, they still found, the time. They didn't have all the trinkets, they didn't have all of the technology, hell, they didn't have all of, the ball games, hell to, how like we do today. They still had that stuff, but it wasn't as bad, today. But now how they want you to focus on so much of the bullshit to where you don't even want to even dive, into this knowledge. And then the few who do, even the majority of them still don't even take what they've come to learn and actually put it back out into the world. And that's the problem. It's like that's the frustrating part, how about this whole scenario is, there are people out there who at least have some, form of knowledge of what's going on. Because I find them, hell, I talk to them. You see them online, you see them freaking the chats, you see them freaking the comments, you see them in the Telegram groups. But then it's like, when you dive deeper, like 99% of them are still just sitting on shit, just holding their dick, not doing shit, just learning, saying, "Oh, I'm doing the shadow work." If you was doing the shadow work, then you would be doing that and learning how to create and put this knowledge out. They both go hand in hand. So, hell, again, it's that fear dynamic, because fear is that frequency that stops creation. It's that frequency that stops growth. It's that frequency that stops learning. It's that frequency that stops your action, because the word fear itself means a sudden danger. So when you are in that mindset, that negative polarity, you just stop. That's why we have what fight, flight, or freeze. You're gonna fight, you're gonna freeze, or you're going to run, because there is an immediate danger in your kind of environment. You take in that knowledge, it's going to be a stimulus, a reaction, and therefore you bypass the logical, conscious, reasonable, higher forms of intelligent thought. So, hell again, that fear is what stops, retards, and stagnates creation. And that's the main reason why so many people don't want to get involved in this work, because they understand the responsibility that comes along with knowledge once it is applied. Because yes, it is a huge responsibility. Because Kris, I can relate to you. Today was a hard day for me to even come on here, but I still did it because I wasn't gonna leave you hanging. Hell, I've had a shitty week, but it is what it is. This work is more hell important, and doing this is the great labor of love and a sacrifice. So hell, I feel your pain. I mean, like, I don't have a family like you do, but man, like, I was struggling like 10 minutes before. I was like, man, like, do I even want to do this? But I set up like I because my main room is down, had electrical problems. But I'm like, that's no reason to not, hell, join you. So I took some shit from out the room and, set up a little, mock station in my bedroom. He'll feel like shit, pissed off, but it is what it is, you know. But that's a sacrifice, man. So I can feel you.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here. Glad you made the effort. Always appreciate you coming on. Greatly appreciated. And yeah, that's it's what it takes. Is you gotta persist. Um, you know the this show is a bit I don't know. Every week, it's demanding. Um, if you do it a month, then there's only 12 every year. If you do it every week, potentially 52 every year. So that's a lot. But yeah, you just gotta, luckily, as I mentioned, a lot of this is based on what Passio's talked about. So we gotta just be broken records. Even if I've talked about morality before, and I'm gonna keep talking about morality, and I'm gonna keep repeating things in different ways, in different contexts, with different angles, but we're always repeating the core things over and over because that's what matters, and trying to link it in different ways with consciousness, or um, talking about aspects of the universe, and like what I got coming up with entropy and chaos, which again influenced by Passio. Obviously, he's like I said. If you want to look for inspiration on what to talk about, start with podcast 1 and go to podcast 2 and go to each podcast. I'm sure it's easy to find something to talk about that's related around the getting people to understand objective morality. Even if you're not talking about objective morality itself, there's peripheral knowledge that acts as prerequisites to better understand it. Well, not necessarily a prerequisite, but supplementary to understand different aspects of it, like importance of truth and whatnot. Um, yeah, so if you're going to be seeking pleasure and survival rewards, well, that's instead of promoting that potential for that long term higher reward of no longer having enslavement, if you're just seeking that pleasure or survival rewards, to keep existing or to keep enjoying life, then that keeps the failure of living in true freedom going. And that failure to actualize those ends of ending our enslavement will persist, and it will continue until more people get involved to try to become a percentage of influence potential for other people to be influenced, and then continue that snowball effect. So if we look at the world overall, as Brendan mentioned, fear or involution has this world. That's why everyone accepts the enslavement that they're in. They don't understand it specifically under those terms of it being enslavement. And if you just told people, we are slaves, most people would be like, no, we're not. I'm not a slave, because they don't have the wider understanding of that word and how it applies in different contexts, because they're just thinking about it within the specific context of historical plantation enslavement. So yeah, they can realize it's the condition or not, but everyone's accepting their enslavement, the majority. And those that want to enslave purposefully serve that force. They're in that like I have here, that those are the dark carers. They're purposefully making it go down. And everyone else is just, they're running a systemic loop in that live, survive, procreate, enjoy life, die. And then they just go round and round. And that's just, they reap the effects of the condition. They're still in ignorance. They don't care. They're in cowardice or laziness about this overall condition to do anything about it, even if they know about it. And then they just keep outputting relative to that. And then they just focus on living. They want to enjoy life. They want to survive, make sure they survive, make sure they have comfort, and then procreate, keep their lineage going, their genetics or whatever, and enjoy life, and then die. And then everyone just keeps repeating that. So is it any wonder why we're more or less on a downward slope as opposed to truly a positive one? Because people are just being led. They're just going with the flow. And that's the complicity part that I went into pretty deeply in my morality presentation. So those dark carers, well, they're purposefully serving that force, and everyone else is not with purpose, with intent, with their conscious will being applied to serve it, but they are still serving it in an unconscious capacity because they've been conditioned to accept that way of life, which is a way of life of serving it. So these controllers, the enslavers, keep us in fear to control us. So this is another aspect of how fear is used, of fear of what they will do if we disobey, because they are the authorities and they keep us in line. We're in fear of what they tell us to be afraid of. Be afraid of the terrorists. Be afraid of viruses. Be afraid of the temperature, right? The global warming transferred into climate change, which is essentially just saying global warming, but not using the word global warming or anthropogenic warming. So be afraid of terrorists, be afraid of viruses, be afraid of temperature. And here's the solution. You don't need to actually think about it. Is it a solution that actually works? Is this problem for real? Don't think too deeply about it. Don't think about the problem. Don't diagnose it. Don't, by way of knowledge, diagnose. Don't do that. Just accept what we tell you. Be afraid, and here's our solution. And accept that solution as well, because it's going to bring more control into your life, and it's going to save you from yourself, because you're too much of an ignorant, immature child to be able to organize and manage your own life. So you need us, the rulers, the masters, the authorities, to manage life for you and everyone else around you. So accept our control, because that's what you want. So we comply with what they want to do. the carbon taxes, the 15-minute cities, Patriot Acts, more surveillance, more control, own nothing and be happy, decide what our rights are. That's what we're accepting. And the fear of freedom from the government is seen as chaos. And the fear of the responsibility of infinite potential for freedom and chaos and having to deal with that. That's what a lot of people are afraid of, and that's why they want that government. Because not having government and the authority, which is equated to order, well, then if you don't have that thing that you equate to order, which is authority and government, then what you have is chaos. And so they fear that chaos. They don't want to figure out how to do things differently. They want someone else deciding how a problem is going to be dealt with and promising to protect you because they're going to take charge. They're going to be the powerful leader. They're going to be the alpha, and they're going to be the protector. And all you have to do is just give up half your salary, and they will take care of you. So people don't want that responsibility. They prefer what they have. They prefer to have government, which is slavery. So they prefer that enslavement because they don't want that responsibility. All right, we'll end it there for today. I'll let you wrap up with anything you want to wrap up about.
Um, yeah, things acting weird. Yeah, again, a constant theme here, and constantly, repeating about morality, truth, courage, higher states of consciousness, caring for truth, right moral action, serving truth, freedom. Again, now there's a pattern here, folks, if you haven't figured it out. I want to say this is what, the 19th or 20th show?
19,
So if
yeah.
okay, well, yeah, that's pretty good. So again, we're just trying to hammer on a certain thing here because we understand that this is the solution. This is the only solution if we want to get to that end game goal of freedom. And in getting there, we have to let go of that fear. We have to let go of those emotional, attachments. We have to let go of those egoic, attachments. We have to let go of those incorrect thoughts and the conditioning that has been the guiding force, sadly, for most people because they are being stirred, they are being piloted, they are being guided by their conditioning put in place by the social engineers. So we have to break those chains, and the only way to do that is by changing the way we think and coming to an understanding of what true, objective, moral behavior is in reality. And yes, the individual can come to understand that it is possible. It just takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of care, it takes a lot of dedication, it takes a lot of willpower, and it takes a lot of motherfucking sacrifice. And you can do it. And once you come to that recognition, then you'll have that power, that understanding, and that knowledge to stand and to actually be a true individual, a sovereign individual. Then you can put what you come to know, what you come to verify back out into the world so that others can go upon that same journey once they've taken that same knowledge. Just as in all of the great kung fu films, you had a teacher who would teach the student. Then once the student has learned, once the student has progressed and has mastered the art, what would the student do? He would go upon his own journey out into the world and start his own school and teach what he learned from his master. It's the same way when it comes to this knowledge. We have to learn it, we have to understand it. And once we do, we'll put it back out into the world in our own way, form, and creativity. And I'll end it on that.
Yeah, well said. Good analogy there with the kung fu, and you got masters, or not masters and slave masters, but a mentor, and you're a pupil. You learn, and you stand on the shoulders of those who came before you, and then you, again, back to the burden and the weight. Well, you're going to be the one who has your shoulders and some more people standing on top of your shoulders, and on it goes. And yeah, that's lifting, I guess, lifting each other up symbolically, where those who are able to influence others, they are lifting people up in elevating their consciousness, raising their consciousness, and it's I guess I want to say magical, pretty amazing that we can have that influence and that impact and provide that value in other people's lives, where we can actually raise their consciousness and help them evolve in a way that really matters, as opposed to the hamster wheel of life of just evolving by procreating our genes. The consciousness one is a higher level. Obviously, we need to procreate. That's important too, but it's a lower level than the higher level alchemical work. And yeah, I guess I'll end it there. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully, people get more of an understanding and maybe motivated to work on themselves more and eventually get started and launch themselves into doing the great work. So take care, everybody. See you next time. Peace.